Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Now is the time for South Africa to seize the opportunity to amend its mining taxation to encourage foreign investment, says professional services firm KPMG. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Can you please elaborate on the benefits South Africa could reap if it amends its current mining taxation legislation?
There's a lot of focus on mining taxation at the moment, and it's around the Davis Committee on Tax. Originally that was going to be only on mining taxation. It's now expanded itself, and it looks like it'll report next month, the first draft. The first draft coming through next month. So people are really talking tax at the moment because they see this as an opportunity to change things that might never come for another few decades. So, climb in now. So they're applying their mind. And, they're looking for a balanced taxation because of all the strikes we've had, because of people saying nationalize the mines. They're saying, look, a lot of the money must flow to the people. And let's make sure that a lot of money flows to the people. But at the same time, you're not going to get any money to flow to the people if you don't incentivize foreign investment. We've got $2.3 trillion worth of metals and minerals in our ground. $2.3 trillion. That is $1 trillion more than Russia, and it's more than $1 trillion more than Australia. So we are the top dogs. We've got more in our ground, even after 100 years of mining, than we've mined. There's a lot to find. So they're saying, look, also incentivize the small guys, because the big guys don't want to drill. They don't want to do the hard yards. They don't want to firm up an ore body. That is done by the junior miners. But there's no incentive at all for the junior miners. In fact, there's a disincentive for them at the moment, which is ridiculous because they've just sprung a change in the legislation from the 1st of January, which penalizes with a 3% add back those that are using foreign funding. So, the wonderful Canadians and the Brits and the Australians, they've been giving juniors money and saying, you must look for something for us. They come to South Africa, they start drilling. Suddenly they find a real tax before they've made a cent. And so this is really hurting them. And also there's a lot of marginal mines around that need to be moved. So they're saying, get a taxation that's really balanced, that gives a lot to the people, but also gives a lot to the companies. So there's a win-win-win situation. And I think Dennis Davis is going to come through with it. I'm sure that he's the right man to look at that. It's going to be something that's very good for South Africa. So, of course, I'm a born optimist. I think that some strong good is going to come out of it.
Harmony Gold CFO Frank Abbott's comments also echo those of KPMG's Mohammed Saliji, who says mine building in South Africa is a rarity. What is their main concern?
Yeah, the main concern is risk, with very little reward. So, the risk to reward ratio has gone all out of kilter. So government looks at the successes, doesn't look at the failures, looks at the windfalls, possibilities during the booms. Because it's a boom and bust industry, all the lunacy happens during the boom. Then governments want more and more. And then in the bust, nobody's got anything to pay like we are now. It's just dead and buried, and there's just no revenue coming through. And that's the time to talk, because this is the reality of the situation. So I think that he's saying, look at where the buildings are taking place. You go into Sandton, you see this massive big edifice. On the top of it is the name of a law firm. You think this is a service industry. It's the actual creators of wealth that should be promoted. Those should have the big buildings. The creators of wealth coming out of the ground, mining, metal, agriculture, etc. Wealth creation, not wealth consumption. Wealth consumption shouldn't have these huge buildings. He's saying, look, I go through the Sandton, I just look at all these new buildings, and generally it's an accounting firm or it's a law firm. That's totally out of kilter. And so, but there's no new mines, there's no new factories. Then I turn the corner, I see a big new shopping center. So we've got our emphasis totally skewed. You should only be able to go to the shopping center once you've created the wealth to go there. But if you start spending all the time, you're going to lead yourself into a cul-de-sac. So he's warning, look, there's no incentive for us to build a mine. None. Huge risk, no reward. So we're backing off. We've been backing off for some time. But look at all the people who are sort of defending companies against the red tape. They're able to do big things at the moment, and it should be the other way around. So hopefully, we will get some sort of reverse when Dennis Davis comes through with his new mining tax regime.
What model do they suggest that government does follow?
Well, I mean, if you go to Toronto and you say, gee, how did these big skyscrapers come about? They say, mining. Because for the last 50 years, they've had a flow-through tax, the Canadian flow-through model.
Mm-hmm.
So I become an explorer. I put my shares on the stock exchange. Everyone buys my shares, even the taxi driver in Canada, whatever. And then when it comes to paying tax, there's a flow-through. The tax benefits that I got, my tax breaks for my exploration effort, which has been all risk and no reward up to now, they flow through to the person who has the shares, and he has a tax claim. He gets a tax rebate. So people in Canada, they have been foursquare behind the mining industry. And that's why you've got so many companies listed on the mining sector in Toronto, thousands of them. Whereas if you go to Johannesburg here, which is where all the mining started, we had a stock exchange ages ago. We had many stock exchanges, even in Barberton there used to be stock exchanges. You can't even find 100. And people are averse to the juniors. They see high risk. But we go back to that thing. Unless you've got these juniors running around, you're not going to know the real value of what you've got in the ground. And a lot of the bigger companies are saying, we don't do any greenfields. That means you don't do anything from scratch. We only go for brownfields. We only buy what we know someone else has firmed up. A lot of them are saying that. A lot of them are cutting back on their capital expenditure, cutting back on their exploration. And in South Africa, no one's doing the hard yards, the exploration, because they're not incentivized to do it. They're saying, come in with this Canadian flow-through scheme. Now, we try to get it in the mid-2000s, 2006. The then Minister of Finance, Trevor Manuel, he even announced in Parliament, yes, we're going to have the Canadian model probably by the next year. We're looking at it. But the next year came and he said, no, we're not having it, because it would create administrative complexities. Because, as you flow through from the company, so these tax benefits are flowing through to the small shareholder, he then puts his application in. So a lot of these come in to the taxman, and the decision was, no, there's too much work.
There's already so much work.
There's too much work. So they said, no, we'll give you something much better than the Canadian flow-through. So 2006, they said, look in the Gazette, July 1, you look in there, well, it looked like quite good to me, until I circulated it to everybody and said, give me your comment. Well, the first guy said, I'm very disappointed.
Is that the secondary tax on companies?
This was not the secondary tax on companies. This was a special incentive for venture capital companies. Venture capital, if you're a venture capital, well, just beyond the angel investor, so you do study it a bit, but you're a venture capitalist, you're taking a chance. You're seeing this guy wants to drill to find out how much platinum is in the ground there. And he says, look, I need 100 million. And you advance this to him on the basis of taking shares and all sorts of things. The Treasury said, give incentives to that guy so that he gets the little fellas in. But there was disappointment from the start. There was one company that said, no, we will pursue this. We want to get this incentive. And when they really studied it, they even turned away. So it was parsimonious in the extreme. What I mean by that, it was stingy. There was no incentive. And it was dealing with a very small little part of the market, not the big market, not the bigger part of the market on the stock exchange. So to my knowledge, not a single person in South Africa has availed himself of that mining incentive. They all turned away and said, wow, can you be stingier? Can you be mingier? And I suppose it's good not to over-incentivize, but this was really under-incentivizing. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. No one ate. So they're saying, look, let's go to that Canadian model. It might have, administrative complexities, but it worked. It's worked. And it's like 50 years old.
It's holistic.
Yes, and I'm sure we wouldn't take it as it is. You would fine-tune it. They'll tell you, hey, there's an unintended consequence here. We've over-incentivized there, whatever. Perfect it.
And for Africa, yeah.
But the thing is, I think that we are neglecting our national patrimony. Our national patrimony is the metal and minerals in the ground that are worth $2.3 trillion. Now, you know, when they come out, they get worth much more. They can really help this country's economy enormously. And also, if you get new technology, you know, linked to it, there could be some factories around that as well, and products that come out of that if you do it properly. And then we can try and model ourselves on a place like South Korea, you know, because they've also got similar number of people to what we've got. They haven't got any metals and minerals in the ground. But look what they do. Imagine with us, we've got metal and mineral, and we also try and educate our people, upskill them to be ready to do, making different products out of, say, platinum, where we're so dominant, you know, the fuel cell or whatever, even auto catalysts or whatever. We already make auto catalysts here. Why not more? Why not try and create something linking with the new technology that's coming up, which is exciting. And we could then make sure that the government, if it does give some of these incentives, it gets the money back in tax so it can feed the schools, get the best teachers in, you know, do the social things, and make sure that this country has the human resource to actually move forward like a South Korea.
It sounds like such an easy fix, and yet it's not.
Yes, and some of the anomalies they complained about, like this 3% ADVAC, you know, they could get rid of that tomorrow, but they don't want to, because we saw there was a new aggression with the finance department during the last budget. They increased our income tax. They started looking around. That has backfired badly. It's damaged things badly, and I think a lot of the people who are spending foreign funds to look for metals and minerals here got their tails between their legs. They're ready to run. And so you can't put people off like that.
Well, we'll watch the space.
Yeah, we will do.
Thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.